Kilembe mine in Kasese district, Uganda, a unique combination of beautiful scenery, a close proximity to the Rwenzori Mountains, a symbol of the dead copper mining industry, but also an environmental hazard that threatens life and ecosystems.
Copper mining and processing in Kasese lasted between 1956 and 1982. And this process involved tunneling the hills to extract the rocks which were rich in copper. And the rocks were crushed and processed, and copper was obtained from these rocks.
Copper is known to exist in rocks in association with other minerals such as cobalt, zinc, aluminium, iron, nickel, silver, and gold, among others. So whereas copper was extracted from the rocks in Kilembe, other minerals were left in the processed wastes, which are called tailings. Many of the minerals in the wastes were metallic in nature. The other danger with copper rocks is that they contain sulfur, which oxidizes when left in the open environment, forming sulfuric acid when it rains. The sulfuric acid formed is so strong and has ability to destroy living organisms in water and even crops in gardens.
Actually, the danger with tailings we found was that, number one, it was releasing a lot of acids. These acids were ending up in water bodies, were ending up in soils. The pH in water-closed tailings was 3.5, which is really strongly acidic, more or less like the acid in car batteries. These acids are known to dissolve all metals, like iron, aluminium, nickel, copper, which are already in those tailings. So the acids were dissolving those elements and also releasing them to water bodies, releasing them to soils where people produce food.
Abantu bampa tubakumanya nko harimo butwe habukuba ecyo kintu nicyenda kubegesa munonga bakimanye ningira haza twamara kukimanya ntiza kureba ngo twataho buryo.
There are several tailing sites in Kilembe Valley and surrounding hills. Some are openly visible, others are overgrown with grasses. Some tailing sites are completely covered by soil. Tailing sites are accommodating residential houses, office blocks, schools, churches, and playgrounds.
The other concern was that the tailings are producing the acids and the metals, but also we had underground water which comes from the mine. This water is also strongly acidic, but also it contains lots of metals. So all the waters released end up in River Nyamwamba, which is a source of domestic water for almost 40% of Kilembe residents. They use it for cooking, they use it for drinking. Even animals consume the same water.
Food crops grown in contaminated soils are known to take up the metals. So in the end, people who consume such foods are also consuming the metals the plants accumulate from the soil as they grow. Metals like copper, cobalt, nickel, and zinc, which are abundant in Kilembe mine area, are known to cause cancers in the long run.
Ebyokurya abantu bari kuhingaha nibache abo kumanya ngo harimo ibyoma abo kubana babutamu obokurya buke burugayo buke
omushenyo guni guryo skin turabishatukire nkatitumanya ngo harimo akanye tinkahurira umuntu uri kutwegesa habuzi byo mushenyo gwa.
Kilembe mine is bisected by a river Nyamwamba, which originates from the Rwenzori Mountains. The river is widely known for its destructive force whenever it overflows, washing away roads, buildings, piling stones wherever it passes, but also claiming lives and property. As local people watch the river flow with such a destructive force, As the children abandoned school to escape the violent waters, we wondered if the local people realized that the flooding effects were more prolonged than the overflowing river water. The effects of the river overflow could later be observed from eroded tailings, flooded schools, homes, and public places like Kilembe Hospital. The river also destroyed crop fields. From the flooding effects, it was obvious that River Nyamwamba was the leading distributor of the mine metals into the soils and other water bodies.
The color is changing because you can see the characteristic yellow color in that part is getting into the river. We really needed to find out whether these metals end up in crops, end up in people's bodies, whether they are actually consumed. So we set up to collect samples. We collected local soils where people grow foods. We collected the foods which are growing in those soils. We collected water from Nyamwamba and taps and other wells. We even went for people's homes and collected water from jerrycans. We collected the grasses which animals feed on, because if the animals takes in lots of copper, the copper will end up in the beef, will end up in the milk, and again the local people will consume. If that meat ends up in the market or the milk, then the consumers will also unknowingly consume those metals. To confirm whether local people are indeed exposed, we collected toenails, nails from their feet, because they can show you if someone has been exposed in the last 1 year or not. And then we did a comparison, their nails with nails from Kampala City, to see whether there are any differences.
All the samples collected were taken to United Kingdom, Nottingham University School of Biosciences, prepared and tested from a modern laboratory to see levels of the metals. Preparations involved grinding food and forage and digesting all materials in nitric acid to enable testing. The results from the tests were shocking.
When we conducted those tests, we indeed found that tailings contained a lot of copper, contained a lot of cobalt, nickel, lead, arsenic, some little bit of uranium and other elements. And the same elements were confirmed in the underground mine water, because this water is also coming from the mine. So these two sources were generally releasing a lot of these metals and the acid, sulfuric acid. So when we tested the foods grown, we found that many had those metals, especially copper, cobalt, nickel, and lead. The foods rich in these were mainly dodo and manassas. We found plenty in cassava, in mangoes, we found them in yams, but also in bananas. In some cases, these elements were exceeding what World Health Organization recommends for human consumption. Forages were also having higher quantities of the metals. So the animals which were grazing were also taking in those metals, and of course transferring them to the milk and the beef. But also we looked at water we collected from homes, from Nyamwamba. Also the amounts of copper, cobalt, lead, nickel were quite high. Surprisingly, even the water which is upstream before Kilembe mine was rich in iron and aluminium. They were exceeding the recommended levels. I remember one of the water samples from people's homes had iron which was reaching 7,000 micrograms per liter, yet the recommended is 200. That is 35 times what is recommended.
Dust from people's homes and public buildings showed high concentrations of metals, especially copper, cobalt, and nickel. This was expected because many of the buildings in Kasese town and Kilembe area are built using sand from River Nyamwamba, sand that is made up of mainly tailings.
Tinkamanya obagwerumo obutwa ninga tugwerumo obuto abokuba ite gwiza tugugobamu tusemerwa mononga.
Indeed, sand miners were getting good business whenever River Nyamwamba flooded, eroding mine tailings and carrying them along. As the local people purchased the sand for constructions, little did they know that the sand could pose health threats in the long run.
Nobono mwanya munyamwamba notero omushenyi gwawe wadde waruga Kampala kiza munyamwamba notero omushenyi gwawe ekikuru n'okutera omushenyi omurungi okatunga akasente akarungi buli ruutu n'emitwaro 3.
River Nyamwamba played a leading role in the distribution of metals to homes and public places like schools and Kilembe Hospital during overflows. But also, wind blew dust into buildings, and some buildings were located on top of tailing sites, implying that metals were actually on construction sites.
When the dust comes, it enters the classes, and the students almost fail how to look because the dust is too much. Brings, I will call it soil in their eyes. They end up even coughing.
Okay, we are aware that this sand for a long time, this is a mining place. We are aware that some minerals are mixed in that sand. So we know that that sand is not safe.
Tirigira season y'umuyaga umushana ritu umuyaga ni gwija guhute takari tutahira mu mazu erinde turigenda na habigere.
So as we spent more time in the area, we realized that the local people were exposed in many ways through the foods they consume, the waters they drink and use for cooking, but also many practices. For instance, most people were walking barefoot in highly contaminated areas. The children were playing in tailings. They were swimming in River Nyamwamba water. They were doing lots of activities. Actually, we found one child picking tailing dust to go and use for washing saucepans. And we asked, and he said, yeah, I'm taking it home to wash the saucepans. Others were playing in tailings like sand, throwing at each other, not knowing that that sand could pose some health challenges. Of course, local people took advantage. The tailings are abrasive in nature, so they use it like steel wool to wash their saucepans, and it was quite common. Along River Nyamwamba, in people's homes, people are washing saucepans using tailings. Whatever residues remain in the saucepans will definitely be consumed by local people. So looking at those behaviors, we realized it's a combination of poverty but largely ignorance, because they are not aware those tailings can pose any threats.
As these children played in contaminated playgrounds, as these children swam in contaminated River Nyamwamba waters, as these women collected water that was unfit for human consumption, little did they know that their health could be compromised in the long run.
Use this water for cooking, for drinking, for animal drinking.
Amidst ignorant households, some people appeared informed about the dangers of Kilembe mine water.
Generally, we have a problem with water in Kilembe. And that problem has been there for some time because, first of all, the water we get is not treated water. This is water you just receive. Pipes are not maintained, they are rusted. Sometimes you'll get the water and you'll find some particles of rust. So then after the floods, we are now having a serious problem where students have to move out, get water from streams, flowing streams where we don't know the sources. So water is not safe.
Amiza agati kugatechese hakuba garimo urofa bingi ebikuruga Kilembe byona ni mwakumani babishuka n'abantu ni bakumani bashuka mu za kasasiro zabo.
Although some of the local people suggested that Kilembe Hospital was the main source of River Nyamwamba water contamination, an interview with the hospital administration revealed that Kilembe Hospital wastes are incinerated or taken to a landfill for disposal.
Other waste like empty vials and empty ampules, we take them to Kasese municipality. That is where we are given land.
Although some of the households were aware of the dangers posed by consumption of River Nyamwamba water, poverty and water scarcity forced many households to drink the water from the contaminated river. The metal in soils were also found to be in grasses the animals feed on. The tailing sites were grazing area, and this brought the animals in direct contact with mine wastes and the metals they contain. The grasses tested were found to have more metals than what is recommended for grazing. Copper and zinc were the major elements which were exceeding grazing recommendations in guinea grass, couch grass, and elephant grass.
From the concentration of metals we found in forage, especially spear grass, couch grass, elephant grass, and guinea grass, the animals are again exposed to these metals whenever they consume the grasses. Remember, the same animals depend on River Nyamwamba water for drinking. So they get from water and they get from forage. So these metals will be reflected again in the beef that is produced, in the milk that is produced, and those consumers who eat those products will again take in more metals into their bodies. That's another route of exposure.
To confirm if the Kilembe residents were indeed exposed to the metals from the mine, we cut their toenails and took them to United Kingdom and tested their metal levels. We compared those nails of Kilembe people with nails of Kampala residents. The results generated showed that Kilembe residents in some cases had 50 times the levels of metal found in Kampala residents, especially copper, cobalt, and nickel. The children had more metal concentrations in their toenails, possibly because of their playing habits, which exposes them to contaminated media. Children's feeding habits are also known to expose them to soil dust ingestion.
Tests of toenails revealed that Kilembe residents were indeed exposed. This had earlier been expected from the foods they consume, from water, from their living environment. In some cases, we would find the copper in Kilembe is 50 times the copper concentration is nails of Kampala people. The same applied to nickel, to cobalt. So indeed we found out that these people are living in a contaminated environment but also have been exposed. But this was not enough, so we arranged for interviews with local people, those who have worked in the mine, those who have lived in Kilembe for quite some time, and the target was to find out if there are some illnesses which can be associated with metal poisoning.
Abantu abamuna bari ku kiro bw'ingine batandika nko rwero umushijo amesho gabayero rero baguma nibazimbenda akumarira bazo mu marwariro ngo bakarwara ubune azimba rugahwafu.
Hii hapo vinajaa kujaa. Tuna ugonjwa kansa, tuna ugonjwa arsasi, ama naenda kwa skania ama kwa x-ray, wanasema roho yako inavimba na liver yako iko mbaya.
Area in Kilembe mines, we have a problem of cancer and ulcers.
Iyo musheka cha Kilembe Mines Limited tuine kizibu ekya cancer na ulcers. Cancer efokire cancer, ulcers efokire ulcers. Omberere ombakuru ombagurusi ulcers efokire ulcers. Nkabe takumanya hizikuruga
nyaho narebire natari umujejo rwire erizoba rikagando harwire nabandi abantu nkayikumi nyumba rebiri abarwire abutuzikire abafire nimbara mwenda.
As a new mining company takes over Kilembe mine, we were keen on finding out if they will behave any different from the past mining companies as far as mine waste handling is concerned.
Definitely all the discharged water from underground will be treated before it joins the main river. In so doing, we shall also regularly check the levels of any metal contaminations or sulfides downstream and endeavor to ensure that there is maximum control of any contaminated water that goes to the river has to be treated before it is disposed of into the main river channel to protect the ecosystems around.
Kilembe copper mining and processing activities may have ended more than 30 years ago, but the waste they left behind will live to endanger life and ecosystems not only in Kilembe Valley but also downstream into Lake George where River Nyamamba discharges. With no tailing waste containment measures, tailings will continue to contaminate agricultural soils, public water sources, foods grown and forage of animals. Ultimately, the local people will pay the price. They are the victims. Victims because of prevailing poverty, victims because of prevailing ignorance, victims because nobody tells them the truth.
At some point, the question has arisen, and that is whether the mining company acted with impunity. And to the best of my knowledge, the answer is yes. The one thing to note is where the mining company dumped tailings, that is mine land. The people living there are merely squatters.
It's of recent when people have begun encroaching the mine land. Otherwise, they were not really poisonous because, for example, as you see, this playground, it's on top of a pilot. But what they did, that put their vegetation and put a playground. So to me, I understand it was not all that poisonous. So the government did put in more emphasis to educate the surrounding about the negative part of it.
However, that wouldn't justify why the tailings were dumped along River Nyamwamba. Because the River Nyamwamba doesn't belong to the mining company. It's a river which flows through people's private land, flows through the national park into Lake George. Lake George is a fishing ground, so someone would have really been conscious to know that they are posing a more environmental and health hazard by dumping them along the river. But also, they could have built a containment wall around the tailings and then the landfill using soil. By then there would be no erosion by Nyamwamba, no erosion by wind, but they just left them open.
The lesson we pick from Kilembe mine case is that multinational companies only care about profits. It is up to concerned governments to ensure that mining companies comply with safety regulations and proper waste management protocols. For now, Kilembe residents remain exposed to dangerous mine wastes and inherent metals through foods, contaminated water, and the living environment. River Nyamwamba remains the only reliable source of domestic water for many households, even though the water is proved to be not safe. Tap water systems dependent on old steel pipes cannot provide safe water either. The local people could be vulnerable, but most are also ignorant. It is only a question of time before the effects of mining become visible and apparent for many. That is, if they are not yet understood. The solutions lie mainly with government. The efforts of government in opening River Nyamwamba channel to prevent flooding and destruction of lives and property are commendable. The same efforts could be applied to containment of tailing erosion and treating underground mine water. The time for intervention is now.